Let's talk about Championship matters, Justin, but before we get on to that, we've got to give a congratulations to Patreon member and Swansea fan Peter O'Connor, who won last week's ticket giveaway. They'll be heading to a Swansea home game very soon, and the good news is this weekend, Justin, we've got another ticket giveaway competition for our Patreon members. That's right, we're giving away another 2 tickets to go and see your Championship team. We're feeling extra generous this season, ladies and gents, and all you have to do to get involved is sign up and become a second-tier Patreon supporter for just £3.50 a month. Head over to patreon.com/second tier and answer this week's competition question, which is the following. Billy Sharp is famously the highest scoring player in Championship history with 130 goals. But who is the highest scoring player who is still active in the Championship? Do you know the answer to that one, Justin? Don't say it, obviously.
I don't think I do. Not off the top of my head.
It's quite a tricky one, actually. Producer Finn was clearly in a pissy mood when he came up with that question, because I think that's quite a difficult one. So anyone who answers that one correctly clearly deserves to go to see their home team this season. Anyway, that question will go live on Friday at 7 p.m. So sign up at patreon.com/second tier. Answer this week's question on our Patreon page, and you could be in with a chance of winning 2 tickets to go and see your club. Got to give you a reminder that the Christmas fixture's just around the corner as well. So now is the perfect time to enter. And you'll also get loads of other amazing benefits, obviously, including access to our amazing second tier Discord. The very best place to chat about the Championship. Anyway, let's talk Championship matters. And while we're here dropping plugs like we've got too many sockets all over the place, I thought I'd give a quick plug to the latest video on the second tier YouTube channel this week, Justin. It's an 11 of the most improved players in the Championship this season. If you haven't already, go and watch it and subscribe to the second tier on YouTube. But I wanted to start today's show by asking you 2 questions on that video, Justin. Actually, 3 questions. Firstly, did you enjoy the video? Secondly, who do you think is the most improved player in the Championship this season? And thirdly, without giving anything away on who is in my 11, is there anyone from that video who you think I missed out?
I felt like 3 questions. I don't know why.
Sorry?
It felt like 3 questions. A long rhetoric.
I did say 3 questions.
You said 3. Okay, don't matter. The first question I'll answer, obviously, the most improved player. I think it's very obvious that it's Boya Sainz off the top of my head. He's the first player that comes to my head because he's just been unbelievable this season. And as I've said on previous shows, lowballing him, thinking he's going to get double-figure goals this season because he's already there. So if he hits 20, and if he hits 20 by, let's say, March, it wouldn't be a surprise because he has been tremendous. And then, players that maybe have missed out, I think Georgie Shakfatadze is worth a mention. I think he's been brilliant for Watford this season. I know he's dropped off in the last couple of games, but certainly for the 80% of the season so far, he has been great. Midfield partner Ed Kiembe again has been really impressive as well. Still not really sure what he brings to a midfield, but he's scored some important goals, and he has been a much needed asset in the Watford team. He's neither a passer, he's a good runner, he's an athletic player, and he scored some fortunate goals and some penalties as well. So he's kept a cool head. There are two names that I would mention here. You might disagree. You have disagreed because you've got a completely different entire 11.
Yeah, well, I just thought the players in my 11 were more deserving, personally. I think Chakfatadze was one. I did consider Kiembe and Chakfatadze, in all honesty, but I think Chakfatadze, I think he actually played quite well for Watford last season. Was just a bit of an underrated kind of player, but I think he has certainly had more of an influence on the Watford team this season, whereas Kiembe has just been scoring a lot of goals out of nowhere, really, hasn't he? But yeah, he's another one who's really stepped up. So I think you could name quite a few Watford players, really, considering how they've started the season and been a lot better than a lot of people expected. So yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, Justin. But as I say, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the second tier on YouTube. I think we've got over 7,000 subscribers now, Justin. Considering at the start of the season, I think we had less than 2,000. We've come on leaps and bounds with our first of all, our podcast episodes going up on YouTube. So if you prefer it that way, then by all means. But also the weekly videos I've been doing too. We're making great steps.
Yeah, we're becoming. Well, I don't want to say a bona fide YouTuber because I'll never identified as a YouTuber. But if we can get 10,000 by Christmas, that would be lovely. Is that unrealistic? You think trajectory wise?
Maybe not trajectory wise. I will point out. I went on one of those websites which kind of gives you like all your data about your subscribers on YouTube, and it did project us to have 250,000 subscribers in the next 2 years, which I thought was a bit ambitious, I've got to say. But if we could get 10,000 by Christmas, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, at that point, 250,000. Is that when we release an energy drink?
Yeah, we've got to release an energy drink and some lunch meals which may or may not have mould in them. Oh dear, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, let's move on to some news from the past couple of days. I'll tell you what, this one certainly caught my eye, Justin. Sunderland captain Dan Neil has admitted he would love to play alongside Jordan Henderson, as the former England international continues to be linked with a return to his former club. Henderson is currently at Ajax after his brief and, let's be honest, PR disaster of a move to Saudi, and is reportedly keen on a move back to the club he supports. Dan Neil said, Jordan is someone I'd love to play alongside. He's a top quality player who has won everything in a great career, so he's welcome to come back if he wants. He's inspired us local lads to keep striving to emulate him. I don't know if we've actually spoken about this move yet, but it's been in the works, I suppose. Well, it's been rumoured for quite some time, I'll say that much. But Jordan Henderson to Sunderland, would it be a good move? What do you think?
I mean, a player of his pedigree and experience, quality, background, and even the local aspect of him originally coming through Sunderland and being a very good player for them in the Premier League, yes, it would be a good move. I just don't know whether it's needed. I think that's probably more so a positive for Sunderland in that they've got a decent amount of quality in that team now and depth in central midfield. The likes of Chris Rigg, Dan Neil, Alan Brown. There are good players already who can play in central midfield. Obviously, Luke O'Nien at a push, although he probably identifies as a centre back now.
Can't believe you missed out Joe Bellingham, Justin.
Yeah, but I'm thinking purely as players who are going to play in that double anchor, that double pivot position, break up play, those sorts of that type of midfielder, and I think Jordan Henderson fills that category more than Joe Bellingham. So yeah, I think on that basis, it would be a good move for all the variables I mentioned. I just don't think it's needed, but I think that's a thing for Sunderland, that they find themselves in a very good position, depth wise and quality wise. That being said, if they are top of the league come January still, or at least in the top two, or within a sniff of the top two, you go out and get a player like Jordan Henderson because he's the difference maker. He can be a difference maker in achieving promotion or not.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the fence with it because I think there's quite a few things you've got to balance out here. I think the first thing is obviously wages. Now, I would assume that because he's earned so much money from his luxurious trip to Saudi, that he would take a pay cut to move back to Sunderland and maybe be on relatively low wages to what a lot of people expect. So maybe that's one thing to consider, but I don't think he'd be massively cheap still. I think in terms of what he would bring to the dressing room, I think that's something that we don't really see or necessarily consider that much, but I think it would be a gigantic thing because, as Dan Neil has mentioned here, he's inspired a lot of young local lads to try to repeat what he's done, and I think that could be a really, really big thing for players like Dan Neil, for example, Chris Rigg as well, Anthony Patterson, I suppose. So all those things are very good, but do Sunderland necessarily need him? I don't know what Jordan Henderson's like as a player nowadays because he's not playing a whole lot at Ajax, and I mean Saudi. It's been well publicised what the standard of that league is like. So would he necessarily improve Sunderland's starting 11? I don't think he possibly would, because I think right now everything's going swimmingly with that midfield, the holy trinity of Dan Neil, Joe Bellingham, Chris Rigg, and then you've got Alan Brown who will come in when he's needed as well. So Well, my other concern would be if Sunderland did get promoted this season, would it be a bit John Terry-esque in the Champions League final for him to come up and start lifting the trophy saying, yes, I've done it, lads, when actually he's not had that much of an impact compared to some of the other players. So, yeah, I don't know, Justin. I'm a bit on the fence with it. I wouldn't be against it because I always like these kind of moves where a player comes back and goes back to his old club. But I just don't, I'm not sure it would actually... I think it's one of those where the reality of the situation may be a lot lower than the expectation of it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's a romance transfer, isn't it? It makes you feel a little bit warm inside that a player who started his career at a club has done very well and he wants to come back or he's coming back. It's that sort of transfer, and I think that's all it is. And I think the factors that you mentioned of him being or not playing a lot for Ajax and obviously going to Saudi and that sort of really, I wouldn't say slowing the trajectory of his playing, but he seemed in a much better position at the end of that season with Liverpool before moving to Saudi. You know, he was on the cusp of the England team, etc. at the age of 32, 33. Now he's 34 and it seems like his career has just dropped off a cliff. Not a lot of game time will do that. It makes this transfer, especially with the youth of the Sunderland team, it makes this transfer almost a little bit redundant other than the experience he's going to bring into the dressing room. Now, you might get another 18 months out of Jordan Henderson, but he's going to be 35 in June. So I think, long-term wise, it's almost pointless bringing him in. But if you want someone who's experienced, who's won big trophies, who knows that side of things, and you want to get promoted and you're in with a chance of promotion, then sure, get him in for the dressing room. But does he get ahead of Dan Neil and Alan Brown in current form? Absolutely not.
No, and plus you'd also be taking precious game time away from those players as well, who you want to develop and you want to see progress in giving that game time to Jordan Henderson instead, who, as we all know, his best days are well behind him. So I think from a romantic point of view, it would be very nice. And I think he definitely would give Sunderland quite a lot behind the scenes. I suppose it depends a lot on what he's asking for in terms of the financial side of things, doesn't it? Because if he is willing to take a huge pay cut, then it's definitely worth it, isn't it? I think we can both agree on that. It's just if he's maybe asking for a bit more. It's also got to be said there is some underlying confusion about what his tax status is with Saudi, because if he moves back to England, then he may have to deal with that and give a lot of money away. So I don't know where things lie with that. I'm not an accountant, so I don't really know. But, I think that's the bottom line here. It depends how much he's asking for, Justin.
Exactly. He could be asking for a lot, or he could be asking for very little. If it's very little, then sure, bring him in. But he's going to be fourth or fifth choice. Do you need to bring in a fourth or fifth choice centre midfielder in January? No, you want to bring in a player who's going to improve the starting 11. That's what you want to go into January for, and that's what it's for. And I think Liberi's has said himself that he, if they are in a chance of promotion, he wants the club to spend a little bit of money. And I just don't think it's necessary bringing in a fourth or fifth choice. If that's the case. So maybe I've just talked myself out of it being a good move. I just think it's one that's needless. It's one that will make you melt a little bit and feel a bit warm inside, but practicality, it doesn't work.
I'm not sure needless. I think needless is perhaps a bit strong, but I think it's not something they necessarily need to do. I don't think it massively enhances their promotion chances. I don't think it necessarily hampers them either. So it's one of those where it gives you a warm feeling inside, but I don't think it's something they necessarily have to do. And let's move on to Stoke City, who have criticised tragedy chanting from some of their fans on Saturday aimed at former striker Tyrese Campbell. It's understood they were aimed at him during their game with Sheffield United. Campbell's father, Kevin, who of course played for Arsenal and Everton, passed away earlier this year. Now, in a statement, Stoke called the chants sickening and unacceptable and says it continues to work with the police to identify perpetrators. It's amazing how low some people stoop into it, Justin. And for what? Because he left your club in the summer. I don't get the mindset here, Justin. It just really sickens me, to be honest.
It's just brain dead supporters, unfortunately. Obviously, it's not all of them. It's worth pointing that out. But it's supporters who think they can get away with it. And unfortunately, they're not. Not only do you get called out by your own supporters, your own club, but the police will be fully aware of you. So, just don't ever get involved. Don't bring down your entire football club, because unfortunately the perception that comes from that now is it creates this unwanted persona of your club and your away support, and it's not particularly fair on everybody else. So yeah, it's completely unnecessary, completely unfair as well, and not what anyone wants to hear, especially Tyrese Campbell.
Yeah, don't really have anything else to add on that particularly. I think the underlying thing is here, don't be a twat. when you go into a football match, just don't be a twat. I don't really get what you'd be gaining from this kind of horrible chanting in the first place. And then hopefully, if you do that, you get the repercussions that comes with it. And it looks like that will happen. So we'll wait and see on that front. But let's swiftly move on, Justin. In fact, we'll take a quick break. But just before that, you will, of course, heard that Erik ten Hag has been sacked by Manchester United, Justin, or at least I hope you would have heard by now. I hope I'm not breaking the news to you right now. Yeah, surprising, isn't it?
Amazing.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because Ruud van Nistelrooy is now in interim charge at Manchester United. He, of course, reportedly turned down Burnley in the summer. They held talks before Scott Parker was appointed. Now, it always appeared to me like he thought to himself that he may have a shot at the United job, but it now seems like that job is going to Sporting Lisbon's Ruben Amorim. So it made me wonder whether he might regret not going for the Burnley job, Justin, because if he wanted the chance to be a manager in the Premier League, then that may have actually been the better option for maybe all involved, depending on how this season goes under Scott Parker. But what do you think?
Well, that job could be up for grabs again this season. For us to make a joke about Scott Parker ball. But look, yeah, he's maybe shot himself in the foot a little bit, but I think the opportunity presented itself at United, and it may be seen an attractive one because Erik ten Hag's stock was suffering significantly despite that FA Cup win. So yeah, it was a calculated risk, if you like, and he made it, and it's kind of worked out, and it might not. The club might still go for him. You never know. I would say the club's Man United that is well run, but there are leaks in the stadium roof, for example. So it doesn't really strike a club that is particularly smooth sailing. So Ruud van Nistelrooy might still be up for the job, but I did see actually a PSV fan saying his football was the most boring that he's ever witnessed.
It's clear Burnley had a type this past summer, didn't they?
But yeah, I just think exactly a good fan experience at Turf Moor. But there's clearly a type there. But yeah, it might work out for him. That job might still be up for grabs come let's say January, February time.
I'm not sure about that, but it would be interesting to live in a parallel universe where we were talking about Ruud van Nistelrooy as the Burnley manager right now. That would have been very interesting to see how that would have gone, because he's quite a highly rated coach as well, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
After what he did at PSV. So how Burnley's fortunes would have been this season if they managed to get him in would have been very interesting to see. But just something I thought I'd pick your brain over, Justin. Anyway, let's have a quick break. After that, we'll talk about some more Championship matters from the past few days. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast, and I just thought I'd briefly bring this to the table, Justin. We've had a lovely email this week from a listener called Phil Gooch. He says, "Hi guys, love the podcast. It's made my unbearable journey into work every day far more palatable." He goes on to say, "I'm a Sunderland season ticket holder and former academy player. I was in the year below Jordan Henderson at Farringdon School, but unfortunately never made the grade, unlike my namesake Lyndon Gooch. We're not related, amazingly. I recently attended an exclusive fan event at the Stadium of Light and was extremely lucky to have a catch-up with one Wilson Isidore. He said he wanted to score 10 goals this season and that he wanted to sign for Sunderland permanently, and there was an obligation in his contract. The guy was extremely nice and such a gentleman. Keep up the great content, Phil." So we possibly have an exclusive there from Phil, Justin. Wilson Isidore to Sunderland permanently. Here we go. Siren emoji, handshake emoji, all that.
Yeah, there we go, ladies and gents. It's all to Sunderland. You heard it here first, or you heard it from Phil first, actually. I think, firstly, what I will say is it's incredible that he's not related to Lyndon Gooch, because how many, so to speak, how many Gooches are there in Sunderland? So
moving on swiftly.
Moving on swiftly. But yeah, it's lovely to see that. I mean, it's good to see Wilson Isidore so settled so quickly. Actually, going to these fan events, I imagine is quite an intimidating experience for a player coming from abroad, for starters. But also, engaging with fans as exclusively and intimately, if you like, as this. What an incredible turnaround.
Yeah, hopefully, if his form continues, then he will be a Sunderland player. On a permanent basis, but we'll wait and see on that front. But if you've got anything you want to get in touch with us about, like Phil, whether it be a meeting with the Championship Henri or just any anecdote from your recent trip to a game or anything like that, please get in touch, secondtierpod@gmail.com. I wanted to bring this to the table. Luton striker Carlton Morris has admitted the team need to be better after they threw away a 2-goal lead away at Coventry at the weekend. They've now lost 7 of their first 12 games and find themselves in the bottom 3. And Morris says, we've got enough experience and strong players at this level to do even more. Now, this, of course, has led to Rob Edwards once again being under pressure. And Luton fans have been critical of him during this start. But what's happened on social media is neutral fans have criticised Luton fans for being critical of Rob Edwards, saying they shouldn't be critical of him and that they should be thankful for everything he's done for them. Same goes for Mark Robins at Coventry during their difficult start as well. So I wanted to ask you today, should sentiment get in the way of a manager losing their job? Not saying Edwards or Robins should have been sacked in these first 12 games, but the question I'm asking you is, should past achievements be considered in these decisions, or do you think it should be a clean slate? Because it's something we've had to dance around a lot in these first few weeks of the season, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't do very well with sentiment. I think sentiment does get in the way of decision making sometimes, and I think with certain managers in this league, like Mark Robins, okay, what you can argue with him is he's got a history of bringing teams up from around November time, so form really does kick on, and that might be the case for Mark Robins. But if they do start to lose games once more after that win against Luton, if I was an owner, I'd be making a very serious decision about whether he's taken the club as far as he can take them. Similarly with Rob Edwards, I don't think the neutral sentiment of, well, look at what he's done for you. I don't think that's really the case with Rob Edwards, because he's done a wonderful, wonderful job, but he's only been in charge of the club for 2 years. I think sentiment leans more towards Nathan Jones and what he did for Luton Town as opposed to what Rob Edwards has done. Yes, Edwards took him to the Premier League, but they were on that trajectory anyway. So I don't think it's the same sentiment with him. There's a lot of compassion there for Rob Edwards because he's such a great guy. He's a lovely human being, and I think that's a key thing. That's a key part of his management. Actually, he recognises the individual as opposed to this thinking of them from a business asset, and that's great. That's refreshing. That's brilliant. But if you're not winning games in football, if you're not performing to expectation, you should be under pressure. You should feel that pressure, and it doesn't matter what you've done for that football club. Unfortunately, if you're not taking them in the direction they need to be going in, not what they should be going in, but they've spent money, you've got a higher wage budget, you just come down to the Premier League, etc. Then you should be you should be doing better, and you should also be held to account for that as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with too much of that, Justin. I think I can think of a lot of examples of managers hanging around a bit too long in their job after previously achieving a lot of success with that same club. And I'm struggling to come up with many who have turned it around in the long term after having as bad a start as these two have had. Not saying that means that they should go, but it is worth keeping that in mind. I think I agree with you that, maybe if you are keeping sentiment in mind, then you've definitely got to keep it in mind a lot more with Mark Robins than Rob Edwards. I suppose sometimes you've just got to look at it and say, we are a business. We want to be as successful as possible. Are we going in the right direction? And do I foresee us being in a better place this time next year with this guy in charge, the way things are going? And that might not necessarily be the case. I mean, sometimes you've just got to say, right, look, I know this guy's done a lot for us, but we need to be improving because things clearly aren't going very well right now. And sometimes that gamble works off tremendously well. I think, ironically, a good example of it working really, really well is Rob Edwards at Luton. Because, yes, Nathan Jones wasn't sacked, and maybe he would have actually got Luton promoted eventually, but Rob Edwards, when he came in, undoubtedly made them a lot better, didn't he, Justin? So even if your club is like, sort of where Luton were at the time when Rob Edwards took over, top half, but not necessarily troubling not being in serious contention for promotion, sometimes it is worth looking at it and going, maybe we just need a fresh set of eyes here. You know what I mean, Justin?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There are numerous and countless examples of managers staying at clubs for a little bit too long. One of them, a good example is Nigel Clough at Derby. A lot of Derby fans and a lot of neutrals will be like, well, how's he lost his job? He's stabilised that football club, he's done this and that, and then Steve McLaren came in and took him to a completely new level before the money was spent. Similarly, I think the other example where it doesn't work is Marcelo Bielsa at Leeds. The sentiment was there when he was sacked, and I think what history tells you is if that manager coming in to replace the other guy isn't as good, then that's where the hindsight aspect comes into it. But sentiment probably should have got in the way of that sacking, if that makes sense. Because I think, again, it depends on how good the manager is. But unfortunately, if you continue to lose games and there is no improvement within a team, why should what you've delivered 2 seasons ago sway an owner's decision? It really shouldn't. That's not how football should work either. I think if you're not delivering to expectation, you're under pressure. Simple.
Yeah, and I think as an owner, sometimes you have got to be brave, haven't you? And make those tough decisions that may not necessarily be the most popular with fans. And I suppose that kind of brings us on to Mark Robins now. Of course, got a fantastic win at the weekend, but it's a really, really tricky one with him, isn't it? Because obviously he's, in terms of the current job that they're in right now, he's probably done the best job in the country, bar maybe Pep Guardiola, I suppose. Because any manager who takes their team from League Two and gets them literally one kick away from the Premier League deserves a lot of credit for that. But I do think Coventry have got to seriously look at it now and say, great, we've got to this level now, but this, if we don't get promoted this season or don't even get into the playoffs this season, this will be the 3rd season where we've failed. I mean, 2nd season really where they've, I suppose, failed would be the appropriate term, because look, Coventry have spent a lot of money in the last couple of seasons, Justin. They spent £45 million over the past 2 seasons. And if Mark Robins doesn't get them into the playoffs this season, I don't think it would be unreasonable for them to say, cheers for all you've done, Mark, but we're trying to go somewhere else now. Because I do think there is such a thing as managers taking clubs as far as they can do, and sometimes a fresh set of eyes can take you to a new level. And maybe that should be the case with Mark Robins. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being cynical. Maybe I'm a cynical, grumpy old man, Justin, who is just too ruthless when it comes to considering what Mark Robins has done for Coventry City as a football club. But when you take it completely out of context, any club without parachute payments spending £45 million in 2 seasons and failing to get into the playoffs in that time, if that does happen this season, that would be failure, wouldn't it?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, yeah. Unfortunately, I know Coventry needed to reinvest into the squad. I know that was a necessity, but unfortunately, the quality that they have brought in and the depth they do have now, you are going to, the perception around you from outside the football club, and maybe within the football club as well, that perception is going to change. You should be pushing higher. And Doug King didn't do it, but for example, an owner could just pocket that money and not reinvest it back into the club. He has reinvested it back into the club. That's brilliant. But he's under no obligation to do that because he's already invested a lot into Coventry City, and therefore the squad could then be built by free transfers, and then the expectation is different from outside the club. But that's not been the case, and unfortunately, when you start to spend money, the wages the contracts you agree with players, that starts to increase, and your budget, which a lot of people will compare you on to other clubs, that will increase, and therefore the expectation for you competing higher than their increases as well.
Yeah. I think you have got to be brave to be a football owner when it comes to making these unpopular decisions. But at the end of the day, if you're not progressing as much as you would like to hope, then sometimes you have got to make those tough decisions. And exactly. I think that's to round off this kind of a conversation. it's sometimes I think you have got to take sentiment out of it. If you accept that someone like Rob Edwards, for example, who's just been such a key, like, beating heart of the club in the past couple of years, if you think that he can still turn things around, then fair enough. But if you are starting to see the big warning signs flashing in your face, then that's when you've got to, ignore what the majority of fans are saying, I suppose, and make a brave decision. As long as you get the next appointment right, I suppose. That's another big thing as well. Some injury news for you here, Justin. Sheffield Wednesday are set to be without defender Akin Famuyiwa for a while after he picked up a serious injury against Portsmouth last Friday. The 25-year-old has been in superb form for the Owls, but Danny Rawle has now revealed he's set to be out for months, although he hasn't given an exact time frame of how long. And that is a huge blow for Wednesday, Justin, because he has been in really, really good form, particularly with Wednesday's turnaround in their form.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. He's one of those players who fits very nicely into that back three that Danny Rawle does play as well, which is hugely beneficial. But to lose a player of his importance is going to be a blow. But I think one of the positives of Wednesday this summer is they have recruited depth. They've also recruited flexibility as well. So they've got players who can fill a variety of positions. So despite Famuyiwa getting injured, you'd hope that Danny Rawle's got a plan to combat that, because the recruitment was a positive one this summer.
Yeah. It's really interesting because during the League Cup game in midweek against Brentford, I think it was against Brentford, wasn't it? Yeah. They had to stick Max Lowe in the back three, which kind of shows how much of a blow this is in terms of not just losing a great player, but in terms of numbers as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Wednesday survive without him. And just really whether this form can continue. Now, they've certainly been on an upturn of form, haven't they, Justin? I mean, the talk of the playoffs has started creeping back up again amongst Wednesday fans. So hopefully this doesn't provide too much of a setback, even though he has undeniably been in really, really good form for Wednesday in recent weeks. And finally, Justin, Emmanuel Aboué. We all know and love him, don't we? Well, his son is in Watford's academy, which is another great way to make me feel really old. But 15-year-old Mattis Aboué scored twice for Watford under-21s. Keep in mind, he's only 15 against Colchester under-21s this week. So many players from when we were growing up, Justin, are having kids, and now they're playing football. I don't like it. It's weird.
Well, you say this is from when we were growing up, but I think this is from when we were a teenager. When we hit being a teenager, it's like Aboué is very much a late 2000s, early 2010 guy, isn't he? 2010. So, yeah, this is it's a scary thing for us. We're aging very quickly, and I think the other scary thing is there'll be a lot of our listeners who would have probably never have seen Emmanuel Aboué play.
Really?
Which I think so. Yeah.
Oh God, that's scary.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I might have overegged that a little bit, but if you haven't, then let us know. But
I suppose if you're 18, then you could feasibly be listening to this podcast as an 18-year-old and not have watched Emmanuel Aboué play, or at least remember him, I suppose.
Yeah, it'd be remembering. So for me, it would be like I never watched Neil Razor-Ruddock play, for example. That sort of era, completely irrelevant. But there you go. Or even Chris Kamara. I never watched Chris Kamara play. I don't know where I'm going. Don't know where I'm going, but
I suppose a more like I don't really remember Martin Keown very well, because he was like just as I was starting to really get to grips to football. That kind of era makes more sense.
Yeah,
I don't know where Chris Kamara came from.
But it does humble you. It does humble you because there are countless players. There's Charlie Cresswell, obviously Richard Cresswell, James Hill of Matt Hill, Justin players.
Phil Jagielka's son scored for Hall's academy this week. He only retired a couple of seasons ago. Couldn't believe it when I saw his son's playing for Hall's academy.
No, that's not good. He is about 50 though, Phil Jagielka. He's carried on. He did carry on till he was very, very old. But this is nice though. It's nice to see these players coming through. It's just a reminder that time is a prison.
Time is a prison. You're very, very right there, ladies and gents. Anyway, this has been the Second Tier Podcast. And just before we go, just in 5 in 10 current Championship stadiums with a capacity of more than 30,000.
Cardiff City Stadium, Pride Park Stadium, Riverside, Ellen Road, Hillsborough.
He's actually done it, ladies and gents. He's actually done it. That's the first one he's got right so far. Just triple checking that the Cardiff City Stadium is over 30,000. It is 33,000. I thought it was. I just wanted to double check that was the case. But there we go. He's bottled the first 2 5 in 10s we've ever done, ladies and gents. But on the third time lucky, he's managed to get it right. Justin, how do you feel?
No, I feel great. I will add that I was ill for the first one. I was poorly for the first one. And then for the second one, it was a very early recording after the midweek games. So there's my excuses. I'm fresh. I'm fresh today. I've gone for it. I'm enthused. Let's go.
You have every right to be enthused, Justin. So that is a great way to end the midweek show here on the Second Tier Podcast, ladies and gents. We'll be back tomorrow with the preview show brought to you by SBK as we have a look ahead to the weekend's championship action. So we look forward to seeing you again for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.